Hey, this is Mark Patterson back again with another fantastic episode of Finding Your Summit. So I thought I had done a bunch in my life until I met this guy, Laird Hamilton. This guy is a rock icon in the world of surf. This guy pioneered basically the whole concept of toe-in surfing. So that is, the wave is so gigantic that you get on the back of a jet ski and then slowly get off and get towed into one of these monster waves. He's done it a bunch. He's been filmed, videoed, and the highest wave he's actually been in is 100-foot wave in Tahiti. It's just incredible. So we go through his life, how he grew up in Kauai. He was influenced by his stepfather, Bill Hamilton, and he became a model, was in a bunch of different movies, and is really led an extraordinary life. And so he shifts his homes between Kauai and Malibu. Not a bad way to live. He's married to a beautiful woman named Gabby Reese, former professional volleyball player herself and model. And they both have really created a really cool life. So it was so much fun to interview Laird, very generous with his time. We went through the whole thing, and then at the end started talking about this new project that he's working on, which is this superfood. So it's really taking organic products and making them into something that really what our bodies need, which are things that are organic and grown from the ground. So we go through that, and just a fun conversation. So tune in on that. As always, if you want to hear about my climbs, various podcasts that I've done in the past, things coming up in the future, you can do that. www.markpattersonnfl.com. I've got Denali coming up in May, and that should be an amazing climb. Actually, I can use some of these techniques I learned from Laird in terms of breathing to help me get to the top and back down in a very safe manner. Okay, so as always, please go in, rate, review, and if you have any comments, please leave them. If you have any people like Laird or others that fit the profile of what we try to do here on Finding Your Summit, please send me an email. I always return. Okay. So on that note, let's talk to Laird. Here we go. Hey everybody, it's Mark Patterson back again with in this case, epic episode. I know it's going to be with Laird Hamilton. So I'm so fortunate that I'm beaming today from Hermosa Beach, and I could probably get my paddleboard out and start paddling hard all the way across the ocean because he is in Kauai, which is the most beautiful island ever. Laird, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's a little rainy here today, but what do you expect from the wettest spot on earth?
It's such a beautiful island. I think they filmed Jurassic Park there. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, there's a long list. I mean, King Kong and Jurassic Park and Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, I think the list is too long to remember at this point.
Yeah, I was over there, I think, 2 years ago, and I hiked the Nepali coastline, and it was a bear. And I do a lot of climbing all over the world, and that, I think it was a 5,000 vertical up and down and up and down, and I think about mile 7 or 8, it gets pretty narrow right next to the cliffs, and then you finally break into that beach. I'm sure you've been out there a few times.
I have. I spent a lot of time. That was like our idea of Disneyland when we were growing up in the summertime. We'd go down there when the surf wasn't up, and we'd spend a lot of time swimming that coastline and hiking those trails. And I used to drive a boat into the far beach, and then we would run out, and we would do that barefoot. That was like because we didn't have shoes, but it wasn't because we were choosing to go barefoot. But yeah, that coastline, there's nothing like it in the world. And that is a bear. It's the switchback from hell. Some of those ones that you just see the trail it looks like it's about a mile away and it takes a couple hours to get there kind of thing.
Yeah, the thing that I found fascinating, and again, I'm going from the mountains, which is my world, into the surf, which is your world, right? And the thing, I sat there on the beach and I spent the night there. I brought in a tent and I was on the sand, and as I was watching these guys who were coming in on jet skis and trying to maneuver of getting in and then back out against the surf. And it was so intense. It was great.
Yeah, my first job, actually, one of my first jobs growing up was bringing backpacks and backpackers in to that beach, and then they'd camp and then hike out. And so we'd have to land Zodiacs on that shore break, and always going back out through the surf is always more difficult because the timing and getting going and before the wave comes, and then the chance of you getting knocked back in. Coming in is always a little easier because you can get on the back of a wave and kind of follow it in and then slide up the beach. But I spent a lot of time in that shore break and watched a few good boat wrecks in those days. And we didn't have jet skis. Now the jet skis make it a lot easier to be in that environment just because of their mobility and the power.
Yeah, it was very cool. So I know that you grew up on Kauai, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's amazing that, our influences are shaped. So I grew up in Seattle, Washington, very climbing centric, mountains, streams, water. And so I spent a lot of time in those mountains. I climbed Mount St. Helens before it blew its top. But obviously you're now in Kauai. So what was that like, growing up as a kid? And the references, I was thinking about this last night. I went to the University of Washington as well. That's where I played my college football. And we were in the inaugural 1983 Aloha Bowl. And we actually went back again the year before and the year after. And, it was interesting, even though we had Samoan, Hawaiian players on our team, it wasn't always a copacetic relationship, with when we got over there. And just like there was that group and there was our group. And, there was a lot of fights going on Oahu Beach. And, just wondering, you're a 6'3" guy, 215. And, how did you mix in with that on that small island?
Well, I mean, obviously it was a little bit like the Wild West, when I grew up out here, because it was, we lived at the end of the road. And so there was a lot of law enforcement, I would describe. It was a little bit more like the law of the land. And I had situations where I'd get in a fight at high school, and then my dad would have to have an altercation with the guy's dad. And I mean, it was one of those things. Everybody was related. And so if you had trouble with one guy, you're probably going to have trouble with the next 4 cousins and the 5 uncles and and all that stuff. So you kind of, I think my stepdad had some pretty good techniques for surviving in that environment. And, one of them was when you're wrong, you take your punishment, you put your head down, and you take your punishment like a man. But when you're right, you stand up and you go to the end, and if you're a little bit crazy, that discourages probably half the people. So, 3/4 of the people will be discouraged by someone that's a little bit crazy because you're unpredictable. I call it the unpredictable dog. Everybody's, people don't like that. They want to know what they're going to get. And so I think being a little bit fearless, and that also is a mechanism that you can use to survive. I think that was something that was, probably helpful for me because I was naturally like that anyway. So to cultivate that as something that I could use as a survival skill seemed natural. That was just like, okay, yeah, I'm a little bit daredevilish by DNA. And so if I'm in an environment where I can really kind of cultivate that and it can be be helpful, I think I use that to my benefit. But, you know when to run. When you're outnumbered and outsized, you're not, I'm never too proud to run and run fast away. But inevitably, you run, you're always going to run. So I think at a certain point, it's about facing, at the end, facing the challenges, right? So you can kind of, I always say that life is a formulaic process. And if formulas you take for success, you can implement into any different field. And, the formulas that I use to survive were probably formulas that have been helpful in my life and to help me survive, But yeah, it seems to be an idyllic environment. And when you talk about beautiful Hawaii but Hawaiians themselves were a pretty warrior culture. You're talking about a war, Polynesians are warrior culture. The football players that are Polynesian, the success that they have, and the Polynesians with the All Blacks. And this is a warrior culture. So when you come into a warrior culture, you better be prepared to be a warrior. Like it's just part of what you're going to deal with.
Yeah, no, I think, certainly I've run into playing in the NFL. You run into a lot of guys who are pretty violent and mean and everything else. And the biggest thing you can do is stand up. And usually that bark is bigger than their bravado, right? And but when you turn, when you show weakness, man, boom, they come after you. So it's really key to make sure that you stand your ground. Absolutely.
Well, and I think a lot of that has to do with, dogs like to chase things that run.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you run, it's like bait, you just create bait where, I know that if the guy realizes it's going to take some work and he might take some shots too, he might not be incentivized. It's too easy to chase something that doesn't fight back. And so if you fight back and stand your ground and, and then be smart, like just don't put yourself, I always talk about trying to be above reproach as best you can. We all fall short in our lives from the glory, but just try to conduct yourself above reproach. And when I say that, I mean, don't put yourself in a position where you're going to be wrong and there'll be an excuse to, implement something, to you. Don't bring that stuff on. And so, I think I learned that. I think that was you start to learn like, don't put yourself in positions and don't do things that would justify somebody or multiple people pounding on your head.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think, one of the things that you mentioned before is, and I look back on my life and I can say the same thing in certain areas, and that is there's certain qualities that I think have propelled you to some of these big wave, scary, hairy situations that, you've had to stand up and face these things, when maybe adversity or odds were against you, and just it's probably served you well in a lot of different circumstances.
Well, one thing about the ocean, at least for me, was a place that was predictable. It was very reliable. Once you were competent in that environment, once you built competence, and competence was built through trial and error and getting to know it and getting to understand it. And once you start to know it and understand it, it's very reliable. It's very predictable, which, and the land's not. I mean, I always say, you never know what a human will do. They do all kinds of crazy things with no rhyme or reason and no, there's no distinguishable characteristics. I mean, there's just stuff people do that you cannot rely on, you cannot predict. And where the ocean for me was a place that I could rely on. I mean, waves come from the sea to the land, and and when you understand them, they're really, really, it's a very predictable environment, which in a way, I think that was a place I was looking for. I was looking for a place of consistency, something that was consistent that I could rely on. And then big waves, what big waves represent, for me was the ultimate challenge, the ultimate, in my competency, the ultimate test of my knowledge, the ultimate test of my skill, the ultimate test of my courage. That was where I would get probably the greatest levels of fulfillment, because I could go there in this environment and I could be fulfilled. Like I could go and accomplish something and then come back and feel like, wow, I was able to do that, or I made it, or I got pounded and I paid for a mistake that I made, but it was really reliable and I really appreciated that.
So I want to ask you a question. So a couple of things. Number one, do you think that Bill Hamilton, your stepdad, was he a big influence in you originally getting into the surf and really going down that and finding that passion?
No, I mean, I was already, listen, how can I say I was already on that road, because he met me when I was, like 5 years old, or 3 years old. But the fact is that, my mom was from a surfing culture. One of her best friends was Linda Benson, who was at the time, a lot of stuff around Gidget was based on her, on these girls. My mom surfed when she was young. My real father was a surfer. Or my blood father, real father, use your real father at the end. So I was and my mom's friends were all surf filmmakers. So I was already immersed in surf culture and looking at surfers. Bill just represented, one of the icons one of the guys that I was looking up to. And then he became my father. But
how did that happen, by the way? How did that connection happen between your mother and Bill?
The story goes, and my knowledge of it is that he befriended me. I was at the beach. He looked like, somebody that I thought would be like what my dad was supposed to look like, because I didn't know what my dad looked like or who my dad was. And so I went, well, that guy would be a cool guy to have as a dad. He befriended me, or I befriended him, or something happened. And then, he met my mom and fell in love with my mom. And had he known who my mom was before, maybe he befriended me so he could get to my mom. I don't know. You never know what men are up to when it's with a beautiful woman. But the fact is, that I introduced the story, as the story goes, of to my knowledge, and my mom's and Bill, is that I introduced him to my mom, and then to kind of hopefully make him be my dad, and then he ended up falling in love with my mom, and then they got married, and he became my dad.
So this podcast is called Finding Your Summit. That's all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way, right?
Yep.
And I've had my share, right? And I could go on and on and talk about that just on my own. I could interview me, right, and talk about that. But the bottom line is, for you, I think, in my case, playing in the NFL and starting these different multi-million-dollar companies and now doing this mountaineering thing, sometimes people see me as a shiny object, when behind the curtain, there's a lot of stuff going on, right? Just like everybody else. And for you, certainly you've had a lot of successes in modeling and being involved in a lot of different movie projects and being sponsored and big wave surfing and towing and all this stuff, and we'll get into. But, starting kind of right out of the gate, it sounded like your dad checked out on your family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when my mom was pregnant, ultimately. So it was when I was in the womb, which, if you want to get into it, you could probably say the sensitivity of the fetus. I mean, I probably, I was inside my mom knowing that something wasn't right? If my mom had the emotions of the sky splitting. So, I mean, I started in that environment. Now, listen, we've all, what doesn't hurt us makes us stronger. And we all can look at all of those things. But yeah, there was a certain, I mean, my mom had a couple of boyfriends before Bill. One of them used to slap me around a little bit when I was a kid because I had a fearlessness, because a protectiveness about my mother from probably when I came out, like as a, like knowing almost like, hey, my mom, I don't have a dad, so I'm going to be the dad. I'm going to be the man of the house and be protective. And I don't care if you're a year old. You probably already are intuitive enough, to already sense that. And then just be like 3 years old. And like, there was a guy that my mom dated that was a little bit aggressive, and the stories would go that I just put my head down and run full speed at him. And he just, he, of course, pushed me off because I was 3 years old or whatever, but I wasn't scared of anybody. I wasn't scared. So, and I wasn't scared from when I was little in that way. I mean, maybe I was scared of sharks and other things, but scared of the dark or whatever, but I wasn't scared of people. People weren't going to scare me.
Yeah. Well, I think the other side of this, again, going through adversity and finding your way. So the gift out of all this is that you had this wonderful influence, it sounds like, with Bill that came into your life, became your stepfather, but you saw him as real father, and just, between his surfing acumen and the way that you had a natural feel for the ocean, for the water, your love of it. I mean, it seemed like it was just a natural progression.
Well, and really, I think what really made the dynamic with Bill and I unique, and the relationship that really cultivated me, but really motivated me is the competition of it between him and I. It was more older brother, younger brother, and it became that. It started pretty quickly like that, and probably right when my brother came, because my brother's the real son of Bill, and so. Came like, okay, now I'm not the real son. And so now I'm like, okay, so now it's going to be competition. Like, I'm going to be competitive. And so, our thing was more of a competition driven thing. And, him and I would duel. And I think that drove me in a way that I probably might not have been driven, had I not had that. Like, I don't think him and I would have had, I don't think maybe I would be all that, or have been able to do all that I've done, had we not had a fair amount of that, because we had that, clash. Well,
it sounds though like it was a positive, competitive situation, right?
Absolutely. I mean, a little bit uneven because, of the separation, the age separation.
No, I get it.
But definitely a motivator and a positive, and a high bar, right? So, I mean, Bill's one of the, in his heyday was one of the, greatest surfers and one of the most beautiful surfers in the world. And so to have that be your competition, like, this is your competition, and that definitely, influenced my style, his style and his things drove me as well. So I think there was a bunch of, there's a bunch of influences. I mean, as a parent now, you realize sometimes that some of the parenting, some of the best parenting is really not how to be than is to how to be. Like, you can be all cool and your kids are like, yeah. And then the one thing you do wrong, they look at it and they go, oh yeah, I don't want to do that.
Exactly. But yeah, I've got two girls. I think you have two or three, right? Yeah. I could have 100 kids. They'd all be girls. I've been blessed. I'm sure you see it the same way.
Amen.
Yep.
Amen. That means high metabolism. That's a high metabolism. Most, like, they say 90% of Top Gun pilots, most of the pro athletes, like 86% of all professional athletes all have daughters. So it has to do with hot, warm metabolism, killing male sperm, and the female sperm being stronger and surviving and all that stuff. There's a whole science behind that. So that's a real thing.
So is Bill still with us?
He is. He's still on the island. Mom's passed away. My mom's been gone for 20 years now. This is the 21st year. But Bill's still here. I still get to see him and keep him in the water because that's our place of healing.
Yeah,
So
that's your connection point. Your mother, I read, had an aneurysm, correct?
He did. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, my dad passed away, about 5-6 years ago now of a stroke, and it was just awful. Right. And it's just, I was close to my dad. I'm sure sounds like you were very protective and close with your mother. And then those things happen, and it's just out of the blue, out of right field. And all of a sudden, in my dad's case, he lost its whole communication grid. And 3 months later, it was done.
Yeah. 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 Well, it's just a reminder again that it's a short sprint down here. And so you got to kind of remember that too. Sometimes we just think it's forever and it just goes so quick. And, you watch your kids go from, you go from being a kid to being an adult somewhat. And then, you see the kids and they just go boom. And one day you're holding them and the next day they're looking at you in the eye. And before you know it, they're off in their own lives. And so it's just a reminder that our stay here is a short one.
Yeah. When my dad passed away 6 years ago, this is kind of the same moment in time when I was going through some other things too, personally with my now ex. And, I needed to really refill my bucket. And when I was looking towards, and it took me a while because I was in this like low place. And so when that lightning bolt finally hit me, it was like, okay, I want to do something athletically great. And unlike surfing where you can just surf till, you fall over, right? Because that's the way the sport is set up. I knew I couldn't go back and play in the NFL. And so growing up in the Northwest, I was just like, I want to become the first NFL guy to climb the 7 summits. And so I entered this whole mountaineering, and a lot of friends came to me and they were like, are you crazy? You got a family, you got this and that. And I saw this great interview that you had about, what do your kids think about going in these gigantic waves? And you and I share the same philosophy around this, which is I really believe, and you said this, so obviously you believe it, which is you're really giving them that courage and that commitment about not giving up on your hopes and dreams and living through life through your kids like a lot of parents do. And you're going to still continue to go out there in the world and just kick butt and make it happen. And I love that. And that's what I'm not doing for anybody besides myself, because that's what my love is, but I'm not going to give it up because, that's what everybody else thinks I should do.
Well, for sure. And, one thing that Gabby and I talk about all the time is, and we both agree on that. I think it's at the end, I think it's all about your values. That's what connects us with people or disconnects us with is having those similar values. But, your kids didn't ask to be brought into the world. You brought them in. And so the last thing you want to do is put the guilt of, well, I used to do all these great things, or I used to do these things that really were fulfilling, but now that you're here, I don't do those. It's like, well, that's not fair to your kids to put that on them, because I hear that all the time. Well, before I had kids, I used to be out there and I was doing all this great stuff and I loved it and the things I did, but now I don't do that now because I have kids. I'm like, well, that's crazy because that, well, first of all, you want your kid. I think it's important for them to see you for all who you are. Like, who are you? Like, who is my dad? Who is my mom? Who are these people and what do they do? And what does it bring to them? And I love to quote the movie The Jerk, but it's find your special purpose.
Great movie, by the way.
Yeah. Your special purpose. Like, I found my special purpose. It's like, find the thing that brings you fulfillment, and you can show your kids what it looks like if you have one, because it's very rare. Not a lot of people out there really have found the thing that brings them that real contentment and really that. And whatever you're driven in, whatever your passion is, I think it's important for them to see what that looks like. Like, hey, that's what it looks like when a person follows their dreams, follows their passions, and is driven, and this is what it looks like. That's what and so, because, that's the best way that humans learn is monkey see, monkey do, right? Yeah. I mean, we operate. That's like, the 4-minute mile was broke, and then the next year 27 people break it. It's because we're the monkey see, monkey do species. And if they don't see it and identify with it, if everywhere they look, they go, let me see, relationships. Oh, yeah, you have to be miserable because every relationship people are miserable. Oh, work. It has to be something that you despise because everybody who works does something they despise. It's like these are the examples. And so everybody follows that train right into those things and goes, yeah, oh, yeah, here's my relationship. And it's miserable. Yeah, because that's what you're supposed to do because that's what relationships are. Oh, this is my profession. That's what I do. This is what people do. And so at least if you can go, hey, cool, this is what a relationship can be like when people love each other and want to be together. Oh, hey, this is what's great about, doing something that you love and that you're passionate about. And listen, if you're fortunate enough to be able to actually do the thing that you're passionate about for a living, congratulations. Now, if you have to subsidize it, that's great too. Because I told people, I go, listen, if I wasn't able to have a profession, I mean, modeling and movies and all that stuff, that was just subsidy for surfing. I'm just like, how can I continue to surf? I got to subsidize it. And so if I'm not going to do it with that, then I got to dig ditches and run excavators and pour cement and build houses or whatever, high tree cutting, whatever it is, I'm going to do it. But that means I'm not going to be doing the thing that I love to do, and I'm not going to be able to refine that art. If I can subsidize it, then I can refine the art. So it's all, I think these are all examples for your kids, and lead the life that you want your kids to be able to identify with as a potential for them to do. That's what that's what I'm trying to do, as difficult as it can be at times. But I just don't want, you don't want to look back and be like, oh, I shoulda, coulda, woulda. There's a whole world full of that. It's everywhere you look. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why there's so many people that are unhappy, because at the end they all have regrets, and then that's separate from health, and we can get into a whole nother hour long topic.
Yeah, we can do that. Well, that'll be podcast number 2. But, one of the things that I've learned to do is really create that vision board. And I think that's one of the things you're talking about, right? And I literally, if you come to my place in Hermosa, you go into my refrigerator, and on it, it's got all the mountains. It's, it's where I've been, where I'm going, all those things, right? And it just helps me keep the goal alive. And I think you mentioned something that's very purposeful, but I have to do other things. I work also with a digital media company, and I help them out. And, that's just what I have to do right now to pay the bills and make it happen as I fund this, my travels throughout the world.
Absolutely.
So there's a big divide between willing and want, right? Everybody wants to be the big wave surfer like Laird Hamilton, but are you willing to do every single thing you possibly can to make that thing happen? And I just see this time and again, of people just the ocean separates in those two areas.
No, it's true. Well, and I think it's always interesting to have conversations with people, and they desire the glory, right, or what they think is the glory, like they desire that, but at the end they are not willing to maybe pay with the consequences. And so, it's like, yeah, you want to be the guy that rode that wave, but do you want to be the guy that wave lands on? Do you want to be the guy that wave takes and holds down on the bottom? Do you want to be the guy that is training to be the guy that gets held down by that wave? I mean, it's like all that. It's like, yeah, everybody wants the ice cream at the top, but are you ready to, milk the cow and make the milk and free, it's like do the process. And, I think it's easy for a human in general. I think we love to look at you at the top of the mountain and go, wow, yeah, I want to do that. But are you ready to take every step it takes up that ridge to get to that point? Or do you just want to go right to the top and be the guy standing on the top? Because I think most people just want to go right to the top and stand there, and they don't realize that really the whole thing behind it is the steps. That really the apex is not, I did a little mountaineering. I got a couple exposures, but you realize that the parking lot really is the final summit. Like, you think the summit's the summit. It's actually getting back down.
That's right.
And getting home. Like, that's the real summit. Like, people sometimes they misconstrue, what the final destination is in any endeavor or any feat. And, and really for me, I think ultimately will be to get through this life, to live this life and do all these things and to make it. Because living it's hard. It's complicated. Surviving is not, it's like, dying's easy. So living's tough. Dying's really simple. It takes about 1 second and you're done and it's over. But living, that can be, if you're lucky, 80, 100 years.
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, one of the things that you had said too is just about, taking the necessary steps to get to a particular goal that you have out there. And I've been put in some pretty hairy situations because guys didn't do what they had to do to put themselves there. They were not physically ready. They weren't mentally ready. We ran into, this is several times down different mountains around the world. And in this case, you're tethered to these people, right? And so it's just like bad things happen, right? And that whole into thin air, inexperienced people going into, bad weather, right? Just a whole thing. So I want to tie something back because you said something.
That's a human condition, that whole thing that people are trying to skip. They're trying to skip the work and go to this and go to this and go to the glory. Skip the work. Oh yeah, don't do the work. Let's just go right to the mountaintop and let's get the thing, or let's go right to the big wave. I mean, it's in every sport. It's in every endeavor. It's in every aspect. Everybody wants to skip the what it's going to take to get to just the final, to the thing. And you see what that does. It's like, give somebody a bunch of money and watch how quick they lose it because they didn't earn it. They didn't work for it.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned one of your buddies, Bill Romanowski, former Bronco, I know, Raider linebacker, right? Crazy guy. And Steve Wright, another common buddy of ours who we were teammates at the Raider many years ago. But, you know, the one thing about, and you're in this category too, but I mean, I can honestly say at least about Steve, because I know him and we've worked out together, but we love the workout process, right? Yeah. And I've seen you in your pool and doing all this crazy stuff, which I want to get into, but you know, it's just like, to me, that's where the fun is. You know, the touchdown, all that stuff, that's, you know, that's great, but
that's a byproduct of your love for the effort, your love for the work. That's just a byproduct. It's like glory, like fame and success and money. Those are just byproducts of passion, of genuine work ethic. That's all. If you don't love it, if you don't love working out and you don't love the training, you're just not going to be able to do it enough. There's just no other way around it. Like, you won't be able to do it enough. If you despise the work, you're just not going to, I mean, there's rare exceptions of people that are so talented, but how great would they be if they really did embrace all of that foundational stuff and really do the work that it takes? Who knows the potential, you know? But the fact is that if you don't love that stuff, you better learn how to love it, because otherwise you're just never you'll just never be able to do it enough to be successful.
Yeah, I was in Sun Valley a couple of weeks ago and interviewed a buddy of mine, Ed Viesters, who's probably certainly America's greatest mountaineer that's out there. And, you know, he wrote a book called No Shortcuts to the Top. So I think that says it all of everything we've been talking about.
Absolutely.
So let me tie something that you talked about a bit ago, and that was about subsidizing your passion, right, to do the things that you want to do. So, you know, in part of this research that I was doing over the last couple of days, I noticed that you decided to quit school when you were in the 11th grade to pursue modeling, I think, or construction or something. So as you look back on it, you know, like, certainly you wouldn't advocate to your daughters, like, go quit high school to go. So what was going through your mind?
You know, I just reached a point with the school system that I was in, the environment I was in, what I was doing. I was at a point where it was not, and listen, how do you know you're at a point when you're in 11th grade about anything? But I knew well enough to know at that point that there was nothing good coming from it. That me going to this school that I was going to, dealing with that environment, and I wasn't going to learn anything more that was going to help me. If anything, I was only going to get in more fights and, you know, more stuff. There was just darkness at the end of that tunnel. It was obvious to me. You know, my mom was at that time single again. And so I asked her if she had to sign me out of school, which was really, I think, heartbreaking for her, because she really wanted me to have, you know, education. She was really wanting to have me to have an education and go to college. And I think that meant a lot to her, you know, and so it was heartbreaking on her, but she also knew that it was part school, part imprisonment, nothing productive coming out of it. And that I needed to, the real circumstances around it were that there was my elementary school principal, who had been passing kids that weren't educated up to grade, got kicked out, and then went somewhere else and tenured, and then came back and was the principal of my high school and showed up at my high school. And I had a pretty tumultuous relationship with her in my elementary school. And then she was all of a sudden there, and some guy smashed my face in a desk in a math class or something. And then I slammed the guy and threw him out like a first story window in the class or something, like, you know, self-defense. But then she suspended me. And the new rule was, you know, both people in altercation were to be suspended. I'm like, well, so if I'm sitting at my desk and somebody slams my face in my desk, then I get suspended too, and the kind of thing. And it was like, that was the mentality. And so I was like, well, you know, I mean, 11-hour school days, and, you know, it was like, I think I'm good. I think I'd rather go to work and, you know. Did
you have a plan? I mean, certainly those reasons would make sense to me, but did you have a plan?
My plan was to go to work. And then just keep surfing, just keep focusing on the ocean. The plan was to work, though, because I knew I wasn't going to, at the end of the day, if I wasn't going to be in school, I had to earn money. So I had to work. And at the time, my mother's boyfriend was a pretty amazing guy, and he was a custom home builder. He built these incredible homes himself from scratch all the way through, from the ground up. And so I would work under him. And really what I went to do was go learn that I was going to try to avoid any way I could to not have to do that for the rest of my life unless it was for myself. Yeah. How to do it. I want to do it, but I wanted to try to, I knew that was going to be a long road to do that the rest of my life. To build homes was going to be tough.
But then you got a big break, right? Somebody saw you on the beach.
Yeah. Well, I had multiple breaks along the way. My surfing kind of brought me, I would say in those days, it was like t-shirts and shorts kind of. Salary and some equipment and brought me an opportunity. And then Men's Vogue was shooting on the island, and Walter Yost, the famous Sports Illustrated photographer, Walter was shooting out of a helicopter, shot some me surfing out of a helicopter at a break on the island where I grew up here. And then the fashion photographer saw the photographs and said, "Who's this guy?" And they said, "Oh, that's Laird." And then that guy called me, and then they shot, and then he introduced me to Bruce Weber, and then Bruce Weber had me shoot for GQ, and and then that kind of began that process.
That's awesome. I mean, you're a guy's guy, so you're not, at least I don't perceive you as, when you start talking about model, like you're that type of, whatever, but it's very cool that you've been able to survive it in that way, and it's really funded your lifestyle for many years, right?
Yeah, well, like I said, I went from that, so subsidizing that, to windsurfing came around. I started windsurfing. Somebody heard about me. The guy flew over, windsurfed with this guy. He said, "Hey, you want to be a speed sailor?" I said, "Sure." I went and moved to Maui, trained for 6 months, went to Europe, and I broke a European speed record in windsurfing. Then I got sponsored by a windsurf company. Listen, as I've had like a fairy tale Cinderella story, 10 different ways. And again, always going back to my passion, which was all of this was meant really just to subsidize my surfing, to keep me in the ocean and ultimately focused on big wave riding. And I'm still, I can say I just turned 54 and my focus hasn't changed. I'm still focused on riding giant surf and ways I can ride it better and ways to train for it. And I've started some companies, and, my creamer business is exploding right now. And some of these other projects are exploding, and they're helping subsidize. It seems like I've been, able, and I'm not sure, and I'll only be thankful and appreciative, but, I have a saying, where there's a will, there's a Sally. Like, where there's a will, there's a way. It's like when you really have a passion and really believe in it and live true to it and go after it, then it seems that in life that, things can get, things happen to help support that. Like, when you put the time in and the effort and the genuineness in your pursuit, then it seems that, that, and not always, of course, not always, but it seems that a lot of the time, the means will be made for you to be able to continue to pursue it. The means will be provided. Like, you just have to believe. You have to have the faith of believing, because I grew up around Hawaiians and with Hawaiians too. And I think that's one of my things that I have. Like, I have this, you see me, blonde hair surfer guy, but I grew up like a Hawaiian. Like, I grew up with Hawaiians like Hawaiians. And, I always say, looking white and thinking brown. But, and I remember the old man telling me one day, he goes, "Hey, boy, boy, you can't eat your surfboard, boy. You can't eat your surfboard." And I just remember what that he was saying that. And I think that taught me one thing, is that you're never going to not work. That working will never, and my mom was an incredibly hard worker. Ridiculous, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. My mom worked like, I don't know, I've never seen anyone with that output, except that they're, one of the top CEOs in the biggest companies in the world, where they just eat, drink, and live the thing in a way that, that's why they are what they are. Yep. And I just realized, hey boy, you're not going to eat your surfboard. Like, never sit back on your laurels. Never be comfortable with like, oh yeah, that happened or this happened or I got a sponsor. I mean, listen, when I had sponsors, I was still working and doing other stuff. And I'm on machines. I'll be on machines. I was on machines, all day yesterday. I'll be on machines today. I mean, I'm going to be on machines tomorrow. I'm going to be digging. I'm never going to stop any of that because I feel like that, all of that feeds towards the ultimate mission, right? It's all feeding towards that. And listen, now I laugh because I say now I subsidize my excavating with surfing. And before I used excavating, but,
No, that's cool. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is when preparation meets opportunity. And so if I would jump on a surfboard right now, which I don't know what I'm doing, or windsurfing, I know a little bit about, I've done, but the difference between you and me is a big gap. And it's because you're out there every day working at your craft. And then that has put you in a position of success where these people now want to go and be aligned with you and what you're doing. So it makes total sense to me. So getting into the waves, where did the whole big wave thing come in? I mean, again, there was nobody doing it and you were kind of the pioneer around that. I mean, where did that whole thing come from? And by the way, I was flying back from somewhere a couple weeks ago, and I was on this plane. They had one of these little movie sets right in front of me, right? A movie called Chasing Mavericks, which I'm sure you've seen. And I watched it, and I didn't know anything about Mavericks, and I mean, I was like a little teary at the end, right? I mean, it was a great movie. I loved it. So a little plug for Chasing Mavericks, but I'm sure you've surfed up there. But I mean, some of these waves are just terrifying. Now, from you, going in and, you're a little guy and you've got little waves. And then as you get bigger, you go bigger waves. And I mean, is that what the purest surfer is always after? Where's the biggest wave in the world go after?
No, I mean, my Bill, my stepdad's, he always said when I was growing up that big wave riders are born and not made, that you have that desire in you. And there's, honestly, there's a percentage of guys that love to ride giant surf that don't even ride small surfs. And some of them aren't even very good surfers, but they just they're drawn to that power and that energy. And, and I imagine it's similar in climbing. It's similar in certain, it's like, why do some guys love downhill? Like they do downhill. They don't even want to do anything else. They just go as fast as they can down a giant mountain. And then some people love to do turns and some people are in the moguls. And I mean, everybody has a different discipline that they're attracted to. And I think big wave riding, from my perspective, represented the apex. That for me was the pinnacle, and that everything else was kind of not a compromise, but it was just below that peak. That big represented the biggest challenge, and that ultimately the biggest challenge represented the biggest skill, and through experience and fitness preparation. And when I was growing up, there was a group of big wave riders on the North Shore of Oahu that I looked up to. There was a few men that were like the guys that rode the giant surf, and they were like the guys, and I was like, those were the guys that I wanted to be like. I'm like, yeah, Jose Angel, Butch Van Aertstalen, these are the, Greg Knoll, Eddie Aikau, I mean, Warren Harlow. I mean, there's like a group of guys that were like, they were the guys, and and some of them didn't even go out unless it was, giant. And then, I mean, these are the guys that go in the water when they're evacuating the beach and they're telling everybody, okay, the road's closed and the beach is closed. And that's when they go out. Like, they wait for that day to go out. And so anyway, big wave riding just represented the pinnacle of the whole thing. And then watching the competitive aspect of surfing kind of emerge because that's when I was around, when it was just emerging, because the competition side had really just a big portion of the great surfers when I was growing up there was no contest. There was no tour. So that didn't even exist. And so they were known just because of their performances, that they performed at a level that they were just automatically some of the best surfers in the world. And so it just represented, and then contests, that you'd go to, I watched the World Championships at Huntington Beach, and it'd be like a foot high, and they'd give the title to the world champion to somebody riding a wave that was like up to my knee. That was confusing to me. I was like, well, okay, that's the world champion, and then you're going to go out and it's going to be knee high. Like, that would be a day I would probably not go surfing. I would be like, oh, take a day off. It's small. Is that the reason why you never really got into the surf contest? Yeah, I mean, a combination of a bunch of reasons stemming from, my kind of naturally aggressive, competitive nature, not so great for the format. Judgment, not so great. Watch my dad go through some pretty, being a free surfer and then subjecting his performances to judgment and then seeing how devastating that was to him. Watching judgments that were so confusing that you were like, how did you even decide that guy won? Oh, a combination of all of those things. Probably the most critical one is I just don't like to be told what to do. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that they tell you when to go out and they tell you when to come in and then they tell you how you did. I'm like, yeah, I go out when I want. And then when I come back, people can tell me how I did, or I'll tell myself how I did. I'll get in and I'll be like, did I do good? I felt good. I did good, or I did not. I didn't do good. And at the end, just loving the fear of it, loving the power and the nature of giant surf. Just love it.
What's the biggest wave you've been in? Is it the one in Tahiti?
Foot surf. We've been in conditions that the surf was excess of 100 feet. So, I mean, around.
That is insane, dude.
Yeah, well, it's insane. I call that the giant. That's like Jurassic Park stuff when you go out there and run with the dinosaurs. I mean, I always tell people, I go, listen, dinosaurs are dead, but when the surf's 100 feet and you go out in it, they're alive because they're like dinosaurs.
So was it your idea that the only way you could get into those waves is by being towed in? Is that how that whole concept came around?
Yeah, because we had been windsurfing and using the power of the wind to get on these giant waves, but we were encumbered by the sail. And so we were trying to figure out, and then when there wasn't any wind, you couldn't do it. And so we were figuring out trying to get around that concept came from. It came from the whole concept of using power to get on the wave and then being able to ride that. And that really has revolutionized what we can ride. So it's allowed people at this point to ride much bigger waves than anybody could physically paddle into, even though the paddling limit is being pushed there and it's being driven and we're, part of what's helping drive the paddle limit is also not only the talent of the athletes, but it's also being driven by the fact that we've ridden bigger waves, so we know it's possible. So the fact is that possibility, the monkey see, monkey do thing where, we've been on these giant waves, we can ride them, so we know we can ride them, so now we can try to manually catch them, but it's pretty cumbersome to use those big boards and do it the conventional way.
What's the conversion point of where you can paddle in, and then when you get to X amount of feet, there's just no way you can paddle in anymore, and you need something mechanical power to tow you in?
Well, that varies on the wave. Like if you go to Tahiti's, because of the way the Tahiti wave is, it doesn't really grow that much taller, but the fact is the way the wave breaks, it just has so much water moving up the face that you're not able to physically get yourself down it to catch it. And, but as soon as you get, into, if you just talk standard waves, standard procedure, as soon as you get into 50-foot face, which we call 25-foot, 25 to 30 foot, that's like the line, that's the line where 50-foot face, 60-foot face, that becomes the line of no return. Like you just can't. And then that's only on the perfect day with the perfect conditions. If there's any wind wrong or bad chop or other variables, then it makes it so you can't, it happens even sooner.
So you get in that way. How do you get out?
You complete the ride. You ride the waves till you get to an exit, and which is part of the art of surfing, obviously, is the ability to be able to maneuver yourself in a place where you can exit the wave. And that's the whole objective, right? Is to take it, ride it, and then finish it in the safe zone, like ultimately when it ends. So hopefully all the power has been dissipated and then you can exit before it exits you.
Yeah. So our common buddy, Steve Wright, former Raider, teammate of mine, I know he's been out training with you in Malibu, right? At your other home. And we hooked up one night in Manhattan Beach, and he was so excited about, some of the training he's been doing down there. And one of the reasons why he thought it'd be applicable to me is because in the mountains, it's all about breathing and regulating, obviously, your breath. It's all about oxygen intake, and so many people aren't able to get to those higher levels, elevations, just because their body, their chemistry, but there's also a lot of things that you can do around that to reduce the risk of having any kind of issues, when you get up high. Fortunately for me, I've not had many issues, but I keep going higher and higher and higher, just like, some of these waves. And so we haven't done it yet, but he was talking to me about breathing. So in the case, relevant to your sport, it certainly makes sense that, a lot of times you're not always going to have that successful ride, that successful exit. And so you end up at the bottom and you guys stay down there for a while. So is that where you started this whole breathing technique?
I've been so breath aware because of obviously the water in the ocean. There's no air below, air above. You have to be, your relationship with how important air is pretty established quickly. Drowning is a very, defining thing to make you aware of breath. So I've been exposed to breath work and different breath techniques for years, but had never really pursued any kind of real kind of strict routine until I got exposed to the Iceman, that Wim Hof. So anyway, the Iceman, Wim Hof's work, I got exposed to his work, that brought me into Tumo, where a lot of his work came from. And then I was already doing hypoxic training. So I've been doing a lot of hypoxic training, and I've been training with resistant masks and some other stuff. And then it just opened up from there. And then I started going in all these different directions. And the one thing about pool training that's nice is it's what it is. It's you breathe when you're up and you can't breathe when you're down. And so depending on how long you're down and how long you're up, you just really get into these breathing patterns. And so all this breath work has just kind of opened up my whole mind to breathing. And there's a couple, and you really see, your VO2 max, and you can, there's a bunch of great things that you can do with breath work that have a profound effect on your health and just on your life.
Well, so next year, 2019, my plan is to head to Everest, and it's about a 14 to 7 day trek from Kathmandu all the way up to the base camp. And so I've got some former NFL players, some Navy SEALs are going to go, and you need to be on that trip with us, right? Practice, put that all that breathing to
the test.
To the test, absolutely. Be great.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds like a long trek.
It's awesome. Well, I'll be up there for 3 months. In 14 days is nothing.
Yeah.
So where do you go from here? You've accomplished so many different things in your life. And before you answer that question, I just remembered something I also want to jump into is this superfood. I'm really intrigued about that because so much of what I do in the mountains, it's one thing about physically being ready. It's mentally being ready. But I learned the hard way, your diet and what you're putting in. And the higher altitude you go, your appetite is being suppressed. Right. But you're burning twice as many calories. And so it's just this constant battle of trying to ingest stuff. Right.
Yeah. Tricky position. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about your superfood project you have going on. Looks really cool.
Well, basically the Laird Superfood is started out of my love for coffee. Ultimately, that's where it comes from. And then it's using the ingredients that I had been playing with in my coffees over the years, and then trying to make up, and then ultimately making a product around that. And then sharing it with people and people just loving it and the effect it's had. And, it's all about healthy fats, basically, and then high nutrient dense, and high mineral dense and high nutrient dense ingredients and all whole food ingredients. So we have certain kind of, I call it our value system that, we always use whole food ingredients. We try to do as minimum amount of processing as you have to, but still make products that can last, that people can get, and and have it not be something that it's great for 5 seconds and it vanishes and then you don't have it, that kind of thing, or it goes bad in an hour. So that's the basis of it. And then I have all these coffee creamers, and then I have these hydration products that I've been using that I use all the stuff authentically myself. It has a profound effect, works very, very well.
Yeah, I want to talk to you when we get done here about some of the things I can take up to Denali, which I head up there in late May. So
yeah.
I want to make sure
there's some great stuff for you. I got this new beet hydrate that we're making, this coconut water calcified sea algae that's pretty incredible. Helps you absorb oxygen, coincidentally, which might be useful for you.
You think?
And then a bunch of minerals and high potassium and calcium and some really highly absorbable minerals, which dehydration really is. I have a theory about dehydration being really related more to mineral loss than actual water. Like everybody think, hydrate, you need the water, but the water doesn't do anything if it doesn't have the minerals in it. And it's all about the electrolytes and the minerals. And so there's some, and really, at the end, this stuff's real simple stuff. It's not so complicated. It's like everybody tries to make stuff so complicated. It's not complicated. You just have to go get it in nature, because nature created nature got through the complication over, that's what millions of years will do for you.
Absolutely. So where do you go in the world of water? The surf and tow-in and hydrofoil surfing and things like that. Where do you want to go?
I'm in the hydrofoil right now. Right now, the hydrofoil, the foiling is just wide open. It just opened up the world for us because we're able to use the wave's energy unlike we've ever been able to. Now we can tap into it in a way and use the power of a wave a lot. If you're riding giant waves, you're just spilling power everywhere, right? You're just trying to scrub power. You don't even, it's like having a really inefficient motor, and then just, half the fuel's going out the exhaust. Now with foils, we're able to tap into the energy of the wave and really use all the power. And so now we don't really need much of a wave to go fast. And, I always really enjoy goals that are real defined, fast, high, big, long. Those are really, that's some really clean, that nobody's opinion there. Like there's nobody opinions in that's 10,000 meters, okay, that's, or whatever. There's no opinions. And so I like those kind of goals. So when I talk about that, I talk about fast, like how fast can we go? How far, how long, how big. And those things just are always out there in my scope. Those are always, last summer I was able to go to Chile and ride, or actually I was in Peru. I was in Chile for snowboarding, but I was in Peru for twice during the summer, and we rode this wave that's said to be the longest wave in the world, but we were actually riding it twice as long as the actual wave because we could catch it earlier and ride it further. And we rode waves for 6.5 minutes and more than 2.5 miles, one ride, which, a mile long ride in surfing would be a world record at a certain point.
Yeah.
We have a place, there's a giant wave here that I wait for. And, like this season, it hasn't even been, we haven't ridden it. I think we rode it one time only, but we would 52 knots, 53 knots, 54 knots. So, we're able to do some of these kind of, these scalable achievements that are keeping my enthusiasm.
Yeah. So last question for you, and this is just my own interest in things in the water, and that's the little man in the gray suit, right? Yep. So as much as you've spent in the water, have you had any issues with sharks swimming around you?
You know what? They're ever present. It's you feel them. I think I've been in the ocean long enough to feel them, like to know when they're there, when they're not there. If you said to me, how many sharks have I seen in my life? If I thought about how long have I been in the ocean? 50,000. I might be in the ocean for 50,000 hours. I don't even know the amount of time that it could be more. I've seen 10 in my life. Yeah. 10 sharks. I've seen some big ones up close, seen big hammerhead, been up with a giant mama hammerhead. I had a huge tiger come swim by me, a giant one, like my board fit between its tail and my 12-foot board fit between the middle fin and the back fin. So you can just decide how long you want it to be, and then I've been around cool little leopard ones and thresher sharks and black tips and, I can count all those. Those are so, in my relationship, but I'm also not spearing fish, in their turf and taking, and competing with them for food, but they're ever present. They're an ever present. And maybe just a reminder, which I think that we as a species have forgotten that we were prey at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. That we're in the food chain. We were in the food chain at some point. And we're not good eating. That's why they're not eating more of us. They really don't want to eat us. We're not, but it's a good, humble position to be in. And believe me, nothing like, a lonely, dark evening or someplace way out in the middle and you're out swimming back in from, breaking your kite rig or your windsurfer and you're a mile out and you're out there swimming thinking, yeah, I don't know if I really love this. But this position of vulnerability, but that I don't know. I don't want to subject myself to it, but I know that it's probably pretty healthy, a sensation for us to feel vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Like I think it's something that maybe realigns your priorities and kind of puts everything in perspective. But listen, The sharks are an amazing creature. I'm in awe of them. They're the cleaners of the sea, and without them, we're not here. I mean, there's some statistics about sharks, like they're older than trees, and they got some stuff about them that we can't even comprehend. What an amazing creature they are. And I mean, they get a bad rap, and they're murdering on, hundreds of millions of them a year right now for shark fin soup, just because they think it has some kind of aphrodisiac power or something. And it's just, in a way I become more protective. And if you've ever met anybody who's been attacked, which I have quite a few people I know that I don't know. I mean, I know them. I met people that have been bitten, and every single one, I don't think I've ever met one that became more scared of them. They actually became less scared.
Yeah, there's a guy I had on the pod months ago. His name is Mike Kutz, and he's a guy that lives in Kauai, and he was boogie boarding. He's about 300 yards offshore, wherever that is. And he was with a buddy, and this tiger shark came up and just like a submarine emerged from deep and just took him. And, so now he's inside this gigantic 15-foot tiger, and he's punching his snout, and he releases him. And so, his buddy, of course, is freaking out. So he takes off. And so he starts to paddle. He's not going anywhere. He turns around and realizes that he just took off half his from knee down. So it goes through that whole story. But I mean, he is now an advocate for shark safety. Everything you just said about, now these other countries are out there slaughtering, millions of sharks for just the fin or something. So he's done actually some really good work around that. So fascinating conversation.
All the biggest advocates that I know of for shark protection and shark preservation, there's a huge group of people that have been attacked. And, listen, at the end, we're in their territory, and why is it that when people are attacked, they become big advocates to protect them? I mean, that just doesn't, because somewhere within there, they realize it wasn't personal. I think that something happened. Now, it doesn't mean, listen, it's a giant animal with teeth that's so efficient like that. If that doesn't strike fear into your blood, nothing does. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like that, they're for real. I mean, I don't, it's like, sometimes I'll feel them and I'll just go in. And then somebody will go, hey, did you hear what happened? And I go, oh, no, what happened? They go, oh, there was a giant shark. I go, man, I felt that thing out there that day. I just went in. Like, I could just feel them, like, oh, yeah, I feel that guy's around here somewhere. The big boy.
Well, you can certainly appreciate what I would feel like when I had to go across the middle and Ronnie Lott was sitting there. So that'd be my shark, on the other end waiting for me. Just crack me. Yeah. So listen, much appreciation to your lovely wife, Gabby Reese, who set this whole pod up. Much appreciation to you. I know we're cut from the same cloth in many different ways in terms of our workouts. I think you've taken it to a different level in terms of more creativity. I'm still out there every day, but if ever the time where I can come and share the pool with you and we can work on the weights, and I really want to continue to work towards this breathing thing because it's going to help, especially in the next 12 months. Love to do it.
I think you need to get the Oxygen Advantage first thing and do that. If you haven't read that book, I would do that right away, because all that nose work, all the nose breathing stuff is so critical. When you read the book, you just completely it just opens your whole mind around the way we work, and that how the nose breathing is so important for the efficiency of our breath work and all that. But it'd be great to have you up at the house and, get Mr. Wright to drag you up and come play with us, come do some ice and heat and, stuff you're used to at this point.
Absolutely. I love that. So where can people find you? And as important too is I want to, this whole Laird product line that you've developed.
Yeah. So the best place to look at the creamer stuff is just go to LairdSuperfood.com. And that's right now we're at a big trade show down in Los Angeles, but that company's got some great stuff. I mean, you can go to Amazon, but it's easier just to order directly from our site and just try those creamers out, because even if you're not a coffee drinker, you can use it. We've got cacao and turmeric and all these other great superfoods. And then I'm on Facebook and, all the other social sites. And then we have that XPT, all our fitness program stuff.
Love that.
XPTlife.com. That's another great spot. But yeah, one will lead you to the other one, but we do have a presence on the internet.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, all right, listen, we're going to put all this stuff in the show notes. I'll let you know when this is coming. And, we ended the conversation with sharks, and I can tell you the entire time I was at peace because I heard all these beautiful birds chirping in the background. So it's awesome.
Well, I appreciate it. Aloha.
Hey, and thank you so much for listening to the Find Your Summit podcast. We are so glad to have you along for this journey. And if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend, share it on iTunes, spread it to the planet. We're looking to broadcast this to every person that is out there because, as you know, everybody has their own summit that they're going after. If you're looking to follow my journey, you can find that through my social links on markpattisonnfl.com. That's Mark, M-A-R-K, Pattison, P-A-T-T-I-S-O-N, NFL.com. So, until the next podcast, just remember, clear eyes, full hearts, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion, so make it happen. Thank you. Bye.